And they'll all start trickling in a second.
All right, we can't pick on Barrie anymore.
You're good to go, Todd.
Good to go? All right. Everybody's set. Good morning, everybody. I'm Todd Tuckey, president here of the Barrie Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today for our virtual town hall. Before we get started, I'd like to ask Paul Markle, our interim executive director, to say a couple of things. Paul.
Good morning, everyone. And again, thanks to our panelists for joining us today for one of our bi-weekly town halls. We've got some exciting stuff to talk about, obviously, with a big, huge push on local. I'm not going to steal much of Michelle's thunder. She's going to speak a little bit about a couple of the initiatives that are coming provincially, but locally we have our hashtag Barrie Together program that's going to be starting up. So stay tuned for that. Just a whole initiative within the Barrie ecosystem surrounding getting businesses online in an e-commerce format with some help from FedDev with the Digital Main Street and the Hey Local platform, which will be you'll be hearing about very soon. So with that, I think I'll just pass it on and make sure we get to the heart of the matters.
Great, thanks, Paul. So in recent months, we have truly seen the spirit of Team Canada as every level of government has come together to ensure that Canadian families and businesses are helped through the economic implications of COVID-19. They have announced supports, listened to feedback, and then made adjustments to meet the needs of Canadians. The cooperation of all levels has made the decision-making process faster than we've ever seen before. As we move towards reopening, the situation continues to evolve daily, and the task of guiding Canadians through COVID-19 is far from over. Government is still actively seeking input to ensure that the needs are met and to address the issues faced by various sectors in our community. In a moment, I will introduce each one of our panelists, and I'll ask them for a brief update from their level of government, after which we'll go to the Q&A session. Q&A session, we've already had some questions pre-submitted, but for those of you that are watching, we ask that you, if you want to submit a question, you go to the submit question to the moderator button, add your question, and I will read it to our panelists. And this morning joining us is Deputy Mayor Barrie Ward from the City of Barrie, MP John Brassard, Barrie Innisfil, and Michelle Eaton, Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And with that, we will start with our Deputy Mayor, Barrie Ward. Welcome, Barrie.
Welcome, and thank you for the invitation, filling in for Mayor Jeff Lehman, who's taking a break. And in fact, all of council's on a summer break right now. But before we went on our summer break, we took time away from discussing parking on the waterfront to pass our COVID-19 economic recovery plan at one of the last meetings before we broke. I wanted to touch on a couple of its measures. The Barrie Together Economic Recovery Toolkit was developed to support businesses with COVID-19 recovery efforts. But businesses can register on the investbarrie.ca website. The kit includes Barrie Together Shop Local, curbside pickup, face covering required window decals, physical distancing floor stickers, as well as hand sanitizer and face shields, all sourced locally. The toolkit also includes tips for how businesses can help encourage consumers to get back out safely shopping and dining locally. As well, the City Support Local campaign launched last week and will run over the course of July and August across various mediums. The messaging will reflect the recent openings of the economy under Stage 3 and face covering requirements. In collaboration with Access Barrie, a comprehensive radio, print, and social media campaign has been developed to encourage Barrie residents to support local businesses. The Barrie Together campaign will champion Barrie businesses and build consumer confidence with the assurance and perception that Barrie businesses have high standards for operations, making public safety a priority. Finally, Invest Barrie and Access Barrie have partnered with Barrie 360 for a new marketing campaign that will highlight new local up-and-coming businesses and some long-established staple businesses across various sectors. It will begin with 5 videos that give residents a look inside those businesses by doing a walkthrough of their places, meeting the staff, and seeing firsthand what businesses look like and how they're trying to keep patrons safe and some of the unique offerings they have. Just a couple other things we've done. We've taken baby steps towards reopening. You've probably heard how we're next week we're opening 2 pools and fitness centers on an appointment-only basis. The dressing rooms will still be closed. There are limited ice rentals being made available. And City Hall itself is reopened on an appointment-only basis. And you probably heard the big announcement recently. The federal provincial funding came through, was officially announced for the new transit station at Allendale, along with money for many new buses. I can't remember the number, but it's more than a dozen. And that's about it, except I think, one of the most exciting things for me personally, I think people have to see that the economy is rebounding. One of the ways you can do it is by seeing some construction cranes in the sky. And we have one at the hospital. And I understand, I haven't been down Yonge Street, but I understand there's one down between Dean and Yonge Street. There's another crane. And in my own ward, behind Paul Sadler Motors, there's a 10-story apartment building going up, and that crane should be going up any day. They're actually working on the site. I know because I've had the complaints from the neighbors about the noise. So those are at least 3 cranes. I hope we can get at least 1 or 2 more in the sky. I think Mayor Lehman called this the 2020, the year of the crane, and before it actually became a year of COVID. So I think there's good things happening in the city right now.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Barry. Up next, MP John Brassard, Barrie, Innisfil. Morning, John.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you again to the Chamber. Michelle, good to be on with you again. Barry as well, Paul. And I can confirm that there is a crane on Yonge Street, just south of where the Shoppers Drug Mart Plaza is there, Barry. Went up a couple of weeks ago, so there is some work that's being done. I guess the big news this week from Ottawa was the Bill C-20. I just got back from Ottawa last night. I was there for the passing of the bill, which was rapidly supported by all parties through all stages very, very quickly. And the noteworthy part of that legislation for business is the changes to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. The wage subsidy itself will be extended until December. There were significant gaps that were identified, not just from our conversations with businesses on the ground right across the country by the opposition parties, but also by the Chamber and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. And it dealt with, as the economy reopens and as businesses start to rebound, what happens with that 30% threshold. Some businesses are still, for example, seeing 25% decline in revenues. They haven't quite got there yet. They're getting there on an incremental basis, but they wouldn't qualify for the emergency wage subsidy. Now, I will tell you from what I've read and what I've been briefed on, it is a fairly complex formula that may require some professional help to go through. Certainly the resources of the chambers right across the country, as well as the CFIB. But if there is anybody that wants a briefing note on what these changes are going to look like, they can certainly email our office, john.brassard@parle.gc.ca, and we would be glad to give them a briefing on it. As I said, it is fairly complicated. The formula, the thresholds, the percentages, what constitutes qualification, etc. But it is something that business was asking for in terms of an extension and what happens beyond that 30% threshold. So one of the things that we're focusing on again, and I'm really excited to hear about the program that Michelle and you, Todd or Paul, will be talking about, this digital online proposal. One of the things that we've been focused on locally is really supporting local and shopping local. We've been visiting with several businesses in many different sectors within the riding of Barrie Innisfil, doing videos, talking to them about what customers can expect as they do reopen, because obviously safety is top of mind and everybody is making a concerted effort, businesses, to ensure the safety of their customers as we do open up the economy into further stages like stage 3. So that's all I have in terms of our report. Again, this to break down, we can spend a lot of time talking about the emergency wage subsidy and the breakdown of numbers. My preference is, if anybody has any questions on this, for me to send them a briefing note on how it works. The challenge for small business as they reopen is they're focused on reopening and serving their customers. you will need, as a small business, I guarantee you this, some advice or some help on how to break down the numbers if you are looking to extend the wage subsidy into your operation. So that's it for now, Todd. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer it, but it's good to be here again this morning.
Great, thanks, John. Also, if you have a, excuse me, a brief summary or something that you'd be okay with the chamber sharing, it would be all right for us to get it out there. And that way, you know, a lot of people can grab that and hopefully not over inundate your office with phone calls and emails. If they can pick it up and they could run from there if they need your advice or someone else's.
Great idea, Todd. And we'll
Excellent.
have that to you by midday. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks, John. And up next from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, Michelle Eaton. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Todd. I'm so glad to be with you all again. And I want to thank you for all the great work that you're doing in the community. We've just had at the Chamber, such unprecedented levels of advocacy and working together with businesses across the province. And to the earlier point made, governments of all levels are listening, responding, reacting. So everyone's voice matters, and everyone's working together on a shared goal, which is the collaboration has been outstanding, and I have to commend every level of government for that. A lot of the things we're focused on in the Chamber is recovery efforts, or you know, there's been some unintended consequences on business from some of the different changes that have been made. So really, you know, trying to get that message to government and help support businesses wherever we can. What I really wanted to and I'm excited to talk about today is a big project that we've been working on over the last few weeks called with RBC and a number other of organizations. It's called Canada United. So what it is because, you know, small businesses have been so hard hit during this time. It's a movement created by RBC, and it brings together the national network of chambers of commerce and boards of trade, Canadian businesses, business associations, more than 50 of Canada's leading brands, to give local businesses the support they need to reopen and thrive during these uncertain times. So there's a couple of different components to it. Canadians are encouraged to watch the Canada United videos online at gocanadaunited.ca, like posts at Go Canada United on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and use the Canada United hashtag to demonstrate their support. So for any of these actions until August 31st, RBC will contribute up to 5 cents, or will contribute 5 cents to a maximum contribution of $2 million to the Canada United Small Business Relief Fund. And they're working with other you know, levels of government and corporate partners to source additional contributions to the fund during the course of the campaign. And the Ontario Chamber is the proud partner that will be administrating the grants on behalf of the National Chamber Network. So what the fund does, it will provide small Canadian businesses with grants up to $5,000 to cover expenses related to personal protective equipment, renovations to accommodate reopening guidelines, and developing or improving e-commerce capabilities. Because, you know, and this is, you know, in line with a lot of the things that we've been hearing from businesses, because, you know, those that, you know, lost revenue either through shutdown measures or whatnot, or, you know, struggling to get back on their feet, because there's a lot of expenses related to that. So we're really proud to be part of this initiative. And if you want to learn more, or if you're interested in seeing if you're eligible for a grant, you go to gocanadaunited.ca. There's also another component, which is, you know, on that theme of shop local. So there's going to be a Canadian United shopping weekend, the weekend of August 28th to 30th. So this is where, you know, on social media and in media, we'll be, you know, encouraging people to shop local in their communities, because, you know, when individuals purchase goods and services from an independently owned business, there's a real ripple effect that's direct and indirect into the economic activity within that community. So it'll be, you know, a great way for us to kind of, and there's been a number of different different programs. You know, you've seen Ontario Made from the Ontario government, but there's been a lot of different programs that have, you know, championed small business, and we were just proud to partner with a number of organizations on this one. So we hope you all join in. I know the Barrie Chamber's been doing some media on it, and they've been supporting on social. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, but I hope you all join our movement.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate the update. And so we're going to get into the Q&A portion of this. And just a reminder to submit a question to the moderator. Choose the option on your Zoom platform, type out your question, and we will be the moderator, Paul, and we'll ask your questions. All right. So we're going to get right.
Point at the Q&A button. We need questions.
Oh, thank you for pointing. Well, the first question, I'm going to put them together, and these I'm sure directed more to Barrie Ward, so we'll just hit these ones right away. Will there be more playgrounds reopening soon? It seems many people are not following direction, using them without the signs being taken down. Is there a plan for issuing bylaw tickets for those not complying? And I'll just go into the second part real quick. With the issues with the beaches in many areas, would a travel ban help? Or municipalities asking the province to help in keeping travelers in their own region to help stop the spread? So they're more geared towards you, I think, Barrie, but anybody's welcome to jump in. And you're muted.
Okay. So for the first question, yes, the playgrounds are being inspected. They have to be inspected before they're opened. And so they are being inspected. The staff has a goal of having all Barrie playgrounds open by the end of the month. Hopefully that will be met. So they are being opened one by one. The fines, they are out actively promoted. They respond to complaints, and people are warned. They've been kind of hesitant to issue heavy fines for somebody using playground equipment. Usually a warning is sufficient to get them off. I mean, the city has been issuing hundreds of fines, but mostly for parking infractions, but they have been issuing some for other matters. I think you asked about a travel ban. There won't be a travel ban with that beyond Barrie's scope. We would not be able to issue. If that was a question, we wouldn't be able to issue a travel ban.
All right.
Is that what the question was? Whether there would be a travel ban?
It was asking if you're working with the province to possibly look at that to stop.
I don't think it's something we'd look at anyways. I don't think we'd. I think it'd be impractical.
No, I don't think it'd be reasonable. Yep. Okay. Next one, Michelle, is probably a little more geared towards you. It says, has the OCC been working with the government on options for reopening schools?
Well, the OCC, so this is actually interesting territory. Normally the school issue is not like an area that we've done a lot of policy work on, but we're actually working on a policy report that looks at things, because you can't, in this situation, you have, people wondering how they're going to go back to work. I have friends that have 4 kids at home, and they're trying to balance, doing their work with doing the kids, doing the schoolwork with the kids is a full-time job for them. So we actually have a policy report that's being worked on right now that looks at things like childcare, education, some of the things that are impacting a large majority of women or women entrepreneurs. So that's in the works right now. We haven't been in discussions about the school openings or how that could look like to date. We've been focused on more broader recovery efforts, but it's interesting for us because normally it's not an issue that the chamber, in terms of business issues, has addressed. So it's in a bit of a new territory for the chamber network for sure.
Yeah.
Todd, I think I was just going to say, I think I mentioned this last time, maybe not, but our Ontario caucus had a meeting with some of the top economists of the big 6 banks, and you would have thought that debt and deficit, fiscal capacity, maneuverability room, etc., would have been the top issue for these economists. The number one issue that they identified as a matter of public policy is the issue of childcare, because what happens if the schools don't open up? To Michelle's point about her friend with 4 children, what's that family going to do? with respect to childcare. So it's an issue that all levels of government, as a matter of policy, need to be looking at, and can have a devastating effect disproportionately on women for our economy as well. So it's a big, big issue.
Yeah, RBC released a report looking at the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women. I recently co-authored an op-ed with Dr. Wendy Kukier from the Diversity Institute about the issue, because you had existing systemic inequities, and then they've been exacerbated by shutdown measures, because a lot of the industries tend to be women dominated as well. And it's been for entrepreneurs and small business owners, it's been really tough. So certainly an issue that we should all be concerned with, and it'll be tricky in terms of space-wise and how it's done. But certainly on our radar, and something that we're putting work to and thought to.
And it could Michelle, limit back to work opportunities, for women disproportionately, and even affect businesses as well, especially women-led small and medium-sized businesses, as you know.
100%.
Yeah. Paul, did you want to comment there?
Yeah, we ran a workshop last night with one of our HR partners, starting to address the HR and sort of legal concerns with bringing people back. And one of the topics that kept coming up in the Q&A was around childcare and what do I do, and if there's a partial opening where you've got 2 days a week they're in, or if there's a phased in, they're on 1 week off the next, like how do they address that from an HR perspective? Really kind of highlights, and and our advice really through those questions and from these experts was plan. I know that Doug Ford and the education minister will be releasing their plan next week sometime, and they're probably going to run a number of different scenarios. But I think what businesses need to do is just plan and prepare, and get a scenario put together for each situation, and make sure that you're able to pivot when and if something comes up, so that you at least aren't caught flat-footed, and maybe you can make decisions now as to how you're going to look at your business moving up into that point and save yourself some heartache.
Yeah, on that point, we've also had the opposite side come in from the business sector from several different points, especially in the manufacturing sector, and they're looking for some guidance or advice or help from the provincial and federal government in regards to regulations. Because what we're hearing a lot of is people aren't coming back to work. These places are having trouble actually even reopening, and when they have reopened, they're having trouble because they have limited staff, and they're saying, okay, depending on the nature of their business or industry, what is it taking to bring in a temporary worker, the expense to bring them in, to train them, to bring them up to all the safety requirements, everything else that's required for that individual business, to hold a job for somebody that they don't know, there's no means, no end to that timeline. And they're saying, like, will there be a direction saying, you know what, you hold the job for so long, and if that individual can't make daycare arrangements or whatever, like, will the government step up and say, we're not forced to keep that job? And I know that's a tough call from either side. I mean, as a parent, obviously your family and your children are your priority. As a business, if you don't have the manpower to reopen and to retool and to get your business up and running, for anybody that's been shut down even for part of this pandemic, they need the money in the bank. They need to regain the momentum that was lost. And if they can't regain it, there may not be a job to come back to. Those industries and businesses may completely shut down. So there was two sides. That one was that factor itself is especially, you're right, Michelle, is from mostly the women perspective. The other side is, and coincidentally falls at the same timeline, is the CERB. People are saying they're basically fighting the government to get employees or to get their employees back, because people are on CERB, and it's like, they're not out there looking. I mean, there's thousands of jobs available in the Barrie area alone. There is, help wanted signs like everywhere across the city. Yeah. People have been reaching out to the chamber saying, how do we get people? Some of the larger industries have been advertising through the chamber, and it's like, you're right. We believe you're competing against CERB, and somehow, it was great at the beginning. I understand the government's thought and rationale behind it. Let's get it out there. Let's make sure that the economy stays alive. Let's make sure people aren't afraid, and that, you know, it could have drove a recession if nothing happened at all. So I get it, but I think it needs to be retooled and reinvestigated, because, you know, there's an article on CTV News the other night I was watching, and it was from Montreal, but they were talking about right across Canada where businesses are having trouble and they're struggling, and it's not because of COVID, it's because they can't get employees, and most of them are blaming it on CERB. So, do you have any thoughts on that, John, and especially in regards to the CERB aspect?
Yeah.
Oh, I do. And I'm sure Michelle does as well. And so the situation locally is desperate. You know, and I'll give one example, and I know they've gone public with this. Napoleon, they could hire, I talked to Ron McCracken, 2 weeks ago, and it's a desperate situation for them because, you know, they've got orders right around the world that they're unable to fulfill at this point. Not just local, domestic Canadian orders, but, you know, they're an international company, a large international company, and they could hire 100 people tomorrow. And the challenge is that with the emergency response benefit, people are weighing the decision for multiple reasons. Do I go to work, or do I continue to stay on the CERB? And, you know, we propose, Todd, and again, you know, our focus has been to try to assist the government as an opposition in identifying some of the challenges with the programs that have been announced. And many of them were announced to get out the door quickly without any thought of what the consequences of those programs were. And we're now dealing with that from a labor standpoint. So one of the things that we propose is a CERB back to work bonus, because as it stands right now, if you make $1,001, you're not eligible for CERB. But we propose that people would still be eligible for the CERB if they return to work, because ultimately what any of us want and what makes for a productive economy and builds capacity is for people to work and for businesses to produce. So, you know, we proposed that well over a month ago. We haven't seen anything except for an extension of the CERB benefits now until October, another 8 weeks, which is going to further cause what I believe to be a labor shortage. And, you know, the difficulty is, to your point in the example that you gave, you know, there's still, I haven't got the latest figures, but the number that I heard, there's still roughly 3 million people on the CERB right now. And yet there's a labor shortage in this country. I mean, you just can't reconcile that from a purely mathematical or just, you know, practical sense. You can't reconcile the fact that there are 3 million people still collecting the emergency response benefit and a significant labor shortage in this country. So it's something that the government has to turn its mind to, and they have to do it very, very quickly for the sake of productivity and recovery of our economy, not just here locally, but right across the country, because this is an issue that is affecting every region of every part of this country. Michelle?
Yeah, you're bang on. Listen, we had governments of all levels rolling out programs that normally take months to develop, and they roll them out in weeks. Even though, I mean, everything could have, you know, I think businesses, from the business perspective, a lot of businesses wanted things even faster. But you know, and you've seen governments, the feds and the province, both kind of tweak or react to responses from the business community to try to shift some things. So this is one of those issues, certainly not lost on government. We've raised it a number of times. And, you know, we're even seeing, for example, with the phased approach, I think I saw a question about the phases of, you know, reopening the economy. Even, you know, we're supportive of a regional approach, because what's happening in Tillsonburg versus Thunder Bay versus Toronto is a totally different scenario. But what's happening sometimes in different communities, especially for businesses that have like franchises, for example, franchise owners that have different businesses in different communities, sometimes two businesses that are in neighboring communities have totally different rules, because each municipality, and of course they have their own jurisdiction, the public health unit can you know, use different language or add additional enforcement or you know, rules. But, you know, it becomes very difficult and challenging for a number of businesses, like when you're in a bunch of different communities, or even if the language is slightly off. So we're seeing a lot of those unintended consequences for all the things that were of good purpose of trying to get programs and support out quickly to people. But certainly for our labor market and our economy to recover, we need people working. So, yeah.
And that's a critical part of our economic recovery, and it's critical for the people who have been off as well, to become productive in society. And so I've just pulled it up, Todd, and I want to focus for a minute on what our plan was that we proposed to the government, because it does make sense. And it did receive, I don't know whether the chamber endorsed it, but I know the Canadian Federation of Independent Business endorsed it because of the labor shortage. But basically, obviously people are getting $2,000 on the CERB, which is taxable too, by the way, which is going to create a problem for them at tax time. So be prepared that you have to pay tax on this. But if somebody was to go back to work, for example, and earn $500, we propose that they don't lose their CERB, but still be eligible to make what they earn, which would mean $2,500, which is a greater incentive than just being just collecting the CERB at $2,000. And so it went up incrementally. At $1,000, we propose that people don't lose their CERB, and that they're able to make $3,000 a month. And same thing. And I talked about the 1,001 threshold, where if you went back to work and you made $1,001, that you wouldn't be then eligible for the CERB. Well, we're saying no, they can continue to collect the CERB and be eligible to make the $1,001. So that month a person would make $3,001. And so we felt that it was a very practical proposal to ensure that, you know, people do get back to work, that there's no thought that they're going to be penalized for returning back to work by losing their CERB, but it also gave business what they need, and that is the employees, in order to meet the demands that they're now facing as they reopen. And so, you know, it's an incremental chart. It goes up to eventually where if a person earns $5,000, then obviously they would, with $5,500, they wouldn't be eligible for the CERB at that point. But even if a person was to go back and earn $3,000, we're still proposing that they not lose the CERB, but it would be reduced to $1,000, so they can make $4,000. The impetus of this is to really focus people on the need to get back to work for productivity, but not also be penalized, because there is a thought out there that if I go back to work and I earn a certain amount, like $1,001, then I'm going to lose my CERB. Well, I don't want that. I can't afford that. So I'm just going to stay on the CERB. So that's the plan that we came up with. We proposed that and pitched that to the government well over a month ago, and we haven't seen anything in terms of any tangible changes to the CERB program, other than the extension that was announced on July 6th for another 8 weeks, which is going to cause a further problem in the labor market.
Yeah, Paul?
I would 100% agree with you, John. I mean, I think that from talking to businesses, you know, there's a hesitancy to reopen in a lot of cases, because they're going to be at that sort of threshold where you know, your costs aren't changing, they're not dropping. So you know, employees are holding off in coming back to work, probably because employers are holding off on reopening. We're only just into stage 3, and when you do the math, sometimes it doesn't make sense for some of these smaller businesses. So that's where, you know, you've got a lot of workers that already are employed, they're just waiting to go back. You know, that the proposal that you guys have made to the federal government also stimulates the economy. So if you've got that extra cash going in, you know, hopefully they're going to be out buying locally and spending and sort of kickstarting things. And the government, you know, ultimately we're not going to be out any more money, because you're paying the CERB anyway. So why not let them get back out there and start getting going, right?
Right,
It works on all levels.
And not penalize people for going back to work, right? Which is, you know, the predominant concern among Canadians who are sitting, who are collecting the CERB right now, is I just don't want to be penalized by going back to work. Well, this proposal doesn't do that. The other thing I would suggest too, Paul, is it's not just the revenue loss of business, but it's actually the cost of reopening. Because I know just in my office alone, with all of the security measures and precautions, PPE, plastic or otherwise, that we have invested over the course of the last month to prepare for reopening very, very soon. We're at, I think, $3,000, and that's just a small office, small operation here. So many businesses are in the tens of thousands of dollars of additional costs to reopen as well.
Well, I think the other thing too is that, the public makes the assumption and generally the assumption is as soon as you open, you're going to be back to pre-COVID levels. There's a productivity, lag there, as well as getting people into your business. Everyone's still sitting at home. Even if you look at the patios, they're not full. And that's what people were screaming about, getting out to get back into restaurants and stuff. And again, you're still seeing some lag in that. So the businesses need that lead time to get up and going. And then, theoretically, we're going to come out of the summer and go right into the winter, which is generally not good for most businesses either, from a foot traffic standpoint. So, I mean, I'm pragmatic. We're going to come out of this, but it's going to be tough, right? For sure.
So, excuse me, a phone call I had last night, and then maybe I'll point this towards John, was from a business leader in our community about their specific business. And they said, could the chamber go ahead and champion with the feds to eliminate the CERB? There's such a shortage of workers, across the country. There's thousands and thousands of jobs. We know there's thousands just in our region alone. So across the country, the jobs are there. The people aren't working. You're being incentivized to stay home. So this individual is saying, like, could you not say to people, okay, you know what? The CERB is going to disappear. You can go on EI. We're not going to, completely abandon you as a country. But the EI pays a lot less than CERB typically. So therefore, they're going to be incentivized to say, I need to go find a job. I've got bills to pay, and I'm not going to get by, on EI compared to what I was getting by on CERB. And, I thought about that, and I thought, yeah, the CERB was put in to be a temporary measure, and it still is a temporary measure. But the rationale behind that made sense. It's like, people need to be incentivized, because right now they're incentivized to stay home. Because if you've got somebody, at minimum wage of $14 an hour, if they worked a 40-hour week, they're getting $560. Why would they want to go and work, unless, mentally you've figured it out. But other than that, why would you want to go to work for $60 more and spend 40 hours when you can, have the time off? Because, hopefully, knock on wood, this is a once in a lifetime thing for us. But the CERB, like I said, you nailed it, John, at the beginning. It wasn't well thought out. I agreed with it at the beginning as to, keep the economy stirred, make sure there wasn't widespread panic across the country. But it's done the opposite now. It's stalling our economy, if not even putting it into a negative compared to where it could be going. So, I don't know.
I mean, I do, and I have shared most of them already, but the CERB, listen, if the government was going to shut down the economy and people were going to be affected by it, frankly, there had to be something on that was available to people, because you can't just lose your income like that. So the CERB did serve its purpose in the beginning, but like every other government program that has been announced, many of them have evolved over time, and they've evolved and have been, I look at the wage subsidy, and we've talked about this before, where it started out at 10%, and where it is now at 75, and then the recent changes to it. That was all because the opposition parties and advocacy groups like the Chamber of Commerce and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business were going to the government and saying, like, this won't work. This isn't working. And the same can be said about the CERB. It's not a matter of just extending it. It's extending it, but also putting people in a position where they need to or want to go back to work to fill those positions that exist, right, not just locally, but right across the country. And that's why, going back to the proposal that we put forward to the government well over a month ago, is that it doesn't penalize people for going back to work. It actually incentivizes people for going back to work. So it has a dual effect. The number one effect is people go back to work. And the second effect is businesses get the people they need in order to be productive, to produce goods and services that Canadians are demanding. And as I stated earlier, in the case of Napoleon, that the world is demanding. And so, the advocacy has happened. I know the chamber, and Michelle can speak to this, I've been speaking to the government about these challenges with these programs. Many of them they've responded to, but for some reason, they haven't responded to this challenge. And the challenge I'm speaking about is specifically with the CERB.
Yeah, and I think it gets trickier because, you know, one size never fits all in terms of support. And it gets trickier when you start thinking about, you know, you've seen some provinces or countries where they've opened and then they've had to backtrack because numbers spiked. So, you know, how do you effectively transition, but have that opportunity still open too for people in case we do have to, you know, pull back on some of these opening measures. So it's a tricky spot, but certainly something that we've, you know, these concerns have been most certainly raised with governments of all levels. And it'll be interesting to see what that transition eventually looks like when we get there. The idea of having, you know, a second wave in the fall, which, you know, you've seen some articles pop up about that, is alarming. And I think we have to, as we go forward, we have to figure out how to, you know, live with the virus and live safely and work safely. So, but it's put a tremendous amount of pressure on a lot of small businesses, particularly.
And Todd, frankly, it's all, yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's frankly a political issue as well. And that is, like, you know, when the CERB was first announced, you know, there was a lot of talk about incentivizing people to stay at home. And this is why, you know, when we dug deep into this and put some really deep thought into this back to work bonus program was the ideal situation to incentivize people not to stay at home, but to actually get them back to work because they wouldn't be penalized for it. So, you know, we've tried to deal with this, you know, the issue of the politics of this in a very practical and pragmatic way. And I think for me, it makes sense what we propose to the government. And the transition, like Michelle said, will be interesting to see what happens, how we transition from CERB to employment insurance. There's talk about, you know, the potential of universal basic income, for example. You know, the Parliamentary Budget Officer just recently did a study on that. I think it's upwards of $96 billion a year for a UBI program. So, you know, the government's going to have to offset if we're still in a situation with the second wave and people still aren't coming back to work. You know, do they continue on, do they go to EI? Do they continue on CERB, or do we move to a UBI program? That's a matter of policy for government. And I'm not sure, you know, I haven't heard anything at the federal level on the government working on this, but they better wrap their minds around it real quick, because the program will be ending as scheduled, even with the extension by October. Barrie, are you there? Barrie Ward?
Barrie, throw a beach question out quick.
Yeah. Barrie, I want to talk to you about Tyndale.
And with that, we'll slide into the next question. If there is a second wave, how quickly do we expect that lockdown and other measures would be put back into place?
In theory, I mean, obviously that decision will be based on the provincial government. I know that the provincial government has extended the emergency orders. I don't know what the date is, but they're keeping all options open. Hopefully we don't get to that point, Todd. I mean, you know, listen, people have to do their part, you know, and follow those public health guidelines. God, the last thing we want is another major shutdown of our economy. You know, I don't think, Michelle, help me out here. I don't think that Canadian business and the people that they can employ can afford another major shutdown of our economy. And so there's simple things that people can do. Heed the advice of public health officials. You know, wear your bloody mask when you're going in and out. I know it's a problem for people, but it's a simple thing to ask, right? This is not a rights issue. This is a health issue, and so let's deal with it in that regard. But you know, if there is a second wave, hopefully we're prepared a little bit better than we were the first time, in terms of PPE, making sure that our frontline healthcare workers have enough equipment that they need. We're certainly seeing business prepared, but again, testing, tracing, isolation. If we do move into a second wave, isolating those who are vulnerable, mass testing, which the province has put forward. Provinces all across the country have, and contact tracing as well, making sure that people are truly isolating and not, especially if they're asymptomatic or symptomatic, not getting out in the community and spreading the virus around. We're certainly not out of the woods yet. We've seen a border closure extended till August 21st, which I 100% wholly agree with. In fact, I would suggest that come August 21st, you're going to see a further extension of the border. It has to be that way because our friends in the United States certainly haven't got this thing under control yet. And we don't have it under control yet. We've done a good job at keeping it down, but we all need to do our part because the last thing any of us can afford is another major shutdown of our economy. Michelle?
Yeah, and I think it's daily. They're reporting the numbers. They're looking at the numbers daily in terms of people that have been exposed to COVID. And I know that like in terms of like the different phases that the government the provincial government's been doing for reopening, they're looking at like a 3-week, 4-week span of data before they're making those decisions. So you've seen different municipalities open at different times. It's based on the data that they've been collecting. So it's all been based on where the virus is going. So I think going forward, say for example, if there's a spike in Toronto, I think there'll be measures for that isolated region. Rather than, I can't see us having another full country shutdown, and I think all businesses will be better prepared. Part of the reasons why there's a full shutdown was to prevent, you saw some countries, they had their healthcare system got completely overrun, and they weren't able to handle the capacity of the folks that got sick. So we were ahead of the game in terms of that and prevented having, hospitals that couldn't take patients. So I think going forward, we won't see the same kind of aggressive shutdown measures if we get a second wave or a different type of virus. And I think we're much more better prepared. I know that, John, do you know when the feds are supposed to be releasing a contact tracing app? It was delayed from earlier in July. Do you know when that's coming out? Yeah,
they were saying they were starting to beta test it like next week.
Okay, because I think Ontario is the first area where they're going to be using that.
Yeah.
And we released a memo, the Ontario Chamber, we wrote to, early on, we wrote to the feds in the province about, 6 key areas where, if we want to reopen the economy safely. And, public health and economy, sometimes people talk about them like they're two different things, but in this case that, you can't have one without the other. So, PPE, access to PPE, contact tracing, workplace management systems, mass testing, all these things are really important. And it looks like we're in pretty good shape in terms of, and I know the province has been doing a lot of thought of preventative measures too, to make sure that we're, have systems in place should we ever encounter this type of unprecedented event again.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, back to the whole point of, and I don't want to, overrun this or anything on the CERB or whatever else, but if there is a second wave, one of the issues, the biggest issues we're having is with employers trying to find employees right now. They need to ramp up. They need to start, putting that money in the bank, saving for that rainy day that they're now expecting, which in the past they never expected. If they can't ramp up and beat this and get things going before a possible second wave hits, I believe a tremendous amount of business, at least in our region, will not survive a second phase of this. So they need their employees back now. They need to ramp up as much as possible so they can be geared for the future of this. And with
the other thing I was going to say too is the business account, which many businesses have applied for, the $40,000 loan. I suspect that not all of the businesses will be utilizing the full amount of that, and if they do pay it back by a certain period in 2021, then 10,000 of that is forgiven. So, keep that in mind, that it doesn't have to be paid back till 2021. So that could create a little bit of a buffer, certainly not all that business needs, but there is that aspect of it as well.
And when we've talked to some businesses, John, when you talk about, you have a relatively small office and it was $3,000 for you just to upgrade. Some of these larger businesses, like they've gone through a big hunk of that money to upgrade. They've gone through that money to help pay the landlords and things like that, which again, it's a good segue into the next question, John, is in regards to this, I believe, CECRA program. Has there been any changes to the program to help businesses whose landlords choose not to apply to this or choose not to be a part of it?
Michelle, there were some recent changes. I'm gapping here. Can you help me out on that one? Because there were some recent changes where at least there was a call for money to go directly to not the landlords, but the people that were renting. But there were some recent changes. Help me out here, Michelle.
So I know that they did the July extension opt-in. I don't think they've made significant changes to the program with respect to that. I know there's been a lot of, we've had a lot of discussions around the CERB program in improving it. But I don't believe that change has been made.
I talked to Polyev a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that he did make a proposal to the government that would take the potential of the landlord having to make the application and giving the subsidy directly to the commercial lease holder, and that way that they could pay the landlord directly, and it would include 75%. But we haven't seen anything with respect to that. But it was based on a conversation with Polyev that we were trying to, again, the things that we're hearing on the ground from not just the commercial landlords, but also those that rent those spaces. There wasn't a significant uptake on the part of the landlords in many cases, many regions across the country. So we're just trying to work on improving that. But nothing's been done up to this point. So.
Because that's another one that they should be looking at a sliding scale, because it was a hard number. You had to lose 70% or more. You lose 69%, you don't qualify. So as businesses are slowly ramping up, trying to stabilize, you still have typically this huge hit of what your rent is. So if the program's out there and it's there to help these businesses, recover and stabilize and be with us in the future, that there should be some form of a sliding scale that says, okay, you know what, you're down, 50% now. Okay, then you qualify for a certain percentage of this, not the full, 75 or whatever. But it's tough because we're finding, even with the landlords that are doing the uptake on it, the businesses that are slowly recovering saying we no longer qualify, but we were shut down for 4 months. So, it might have helped us offset rent, but we still had other bills. We had our insurances. We still had heat. We still had hydro. We had all these things we had to pay for. And those bills still kept coming. And yet the business was 100% shut down because it was totally shut down. So they're saying, like, we need more help. And I get it. And as they're ramping up, again, back to the point of if there's a second wave, these people are still trying to get their feet on the ground. All these small businesses are trying to ramp back up. They need the manpower. They need the assistance. The subsidy is there, but there's no scale to it. It's a hard number of 70%. So,
like I said before, one size fits all never works. So, sliding scale is something that we've and for a lot of the programs, sliding scale is something that we've raised.
Right.
Just because government looks at the different programs and sees how they all kind of fill in the gaps and fill in the places. But for a business owner, when you're looking at all these different programs and you're like, well, I don't really qualify for this one because of this one thing. And, I'm off by 5% to qualify for this one. It gets very frustrating. But like from a government lens, they're like, oh, okay, we have this fills in for this and this fills in this. So this should cover it. Right. So, but yeah, hopefully we see more and more flexibility in all these programs as we go forward.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is, it was mentioned that sending kids back to school will be the decision of the parents. As an employer, will the jobs of these individuals continue to be protected? And I think we sort of started off with that one or leading into that one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough call. I mean, again, family first, absolutely. And as an employer, you want to keep the business going. And without employees, you can't keep it going. And if you've got to retrain and not know, maternity leave is one thing where you have that window of 12 months and you know that, the employee could come back sooner, but you have typically that 12-month window and you can bank on that timeline, bring somebody in and go to the cost. You don't know with what's going on here, whether an employee is going to come back in 2 weeks, 2 months, a year and a half from now. And yet you have to hold those positions. And I can appreciate both sides of this spectrum and saying, as an employer, I need people. And the individual saying, but I don't have daycare or whatever, or there's no schooling. I've got to take care of my family. And I don't think it's a fair
emotional issue
either
too,
side.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an emotional issue. And I know that Stephen, Minister Lecce said he would be announcing the plan next week.
Yes.
Unless that shifts, which possibly, but I'm eager, and I know many of the folks that are tuned in today are probably very eager to see what's in that plan. But it depends on your circumstances too, whether if it ends up indeed being optional, for when you have two parents that are working at home, they're probably, having their kid in class is, preferred. But then, so for some folks, if they have a stay-at-home parent, then for them, and if they're concerned about, exposure or anything like that, their preference might be to homeschool for now. So, it kind of depends on your individual circumstances too.
Yeah, like I know here with the Simcoe County Board, they've sent a survey out to the parents and they've made it clear that your child doesn't have to go back and that online learning will be available. So you do have options whether you're not comfortable sending your child back so that your child can still learn from home. But there's so many variables there of, what will they need for classroom sizes? What will they physically need for teachers? It brings a whole different array of questions to the table. And
how do you get the space?
Right.
For social distancing.
Yeah. Paul?
Well, we sort of covered this last night at our HR webinar. The Infectious Disease Emergency Leave Act, which is tied into the state of emergency timelines, protects jobs for that childcare reason. So you can't lose your job if the reason you can't return is because of childcare. There's a few factors in there. So that's safe until they lift the emergency the state of emergency in there. But in some cases it's completely legitimate. In other cases, it sort of allows people to hide behind it a little bit, not pointing anything out and not trying to get into any contentious situation. It does create a problem. So there are ways you can mitigate that. I would suggest reaching out to, if you're a business owner, a professional, an HR professional, and make sure that you've got the legal and you understand the legislation before you start acting towards getting employees back. Just make sure you don't misstep. It turns into a human rights issue at some point too, and that creates lots of problems. So just as a point.
Just the adverse side of that is the business folds all together and you have nothing to come back to. So
but that's one of the possible outcomes there, right? Unfortunately, it's not fair. It's not fair to anybody.
No, it's not. Okay, and with that, our time is coming to an end. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go around the table here and do closing comments, and I'll just go in the order of my screen. So Michelle with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, you're up first.
Well, thanks again for having me, and great to see all of you. Great conversation. I'll just leave it with join the Go Canada United campaign and help promote that and get the word out to local businesses that may be looking for support in terms of PPE and getting set up online. And that's all. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, everyone. You're on mute, Todd. You have to take a drink.
This is my first rodeo. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. And up next, Deputy Mayor Barrie Ward, City of Barrie.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for the invitation. I would just encourage everybody to keep staying healthy and take measures to avoid the transmission. I can't even imagine the nightmare that a winter pandemic would be. It would bring in whole new areas. And just as one last thing, just remember to businesses that when you want to get the toolkit, go to investbarrie.ca.
Excellent. Thank you, Barrie. Up next, MP Barrie Innisfil, John Brassard.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you to the chamber again. This is like the 7th or 8th one of these updates that we've had, and every single one of them I've learned some things either from the chamber, from the Ontario Chamber, or the city as well. So I think they're really valuable, and hopefully people learned some new information at the federal level today. I'm really excited about this Go Canada United program. You know, obviously I said at the start that shopping local and supporting local is critical for our community, and that's why, as I said, we've been doing a series of videos to highlight different sectors that are reopening, what their customers can expect in terms of service and safety. I know we've got a bit of a backlog on the request for videos right now, just trying to find the time to do them, but there are several more that'll be going up over the course of the next week. And if anybody does want a video and help promote their business on our social media sites, we'd be glad to do that. Just call our office at 705-726-5959. And I will say, Todd, that we will get that emergency wage subsidy backgrounder to you, to the chamber, so that you can post it on your site. And as I said, if there's any questions that people have about it, it is somewhat complicated. I will say that just in terms of the percentages and what qualifies. But if there are any questions, we'd be happy to guide your members through that process. So just want to say thanks again. Have a great weekend, everyone. Remember to stay safe and follow the advice of public health officials. We're doing a great job at you know, stopping the spread of this virus, and we all need to keep working together for the sake of each other and for the sake of our economy and certainly our country as well. Thanks again, everyone.
Great, thank you, John. And again, thanks again to our panelists and our participants. Thank you for all you're doing in your businesses every day. We encourage every leader in our community to maintain their focus of slowing the pace of the transmission of COVID-19, whatever stage of operations your business may currently be in. Barrie Chamber is here to help you through all of this. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Also, we implore people now more than ever to shop local. Whether you're supporting a restaurant by going to the restaurant, taking a gift card out, buying a gift card and giving it to a friend, neighbor, whomever, somebody you like, somebody might semi-like, but a little bit's going to help. And as business restrictions are slowly being lifted, please ensure that you continue to follow all social distancing requirements and take them seriously. They're not to be taken lightly, even though the fear may be slowly wearing off as we are enjoying our summer. Our main priority is to keep the community safe and healthy, which is a responsibility of all of us collectively. And with that, everybody, have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Hold on.
Oh, Paul?
Yeah, sorry. Before you go into the chat box. Go into the chat box. In the bottom right-hand corner is a little box with 3 buttons. Click that. Save your chat. We've got the links to Go Canada United, the links to Invest Barrie for the support Barrie or a local business, and then whatever comments were in there as well you can have. So just before you take off, to make sure you get that information.
Yeah, and those will also all be available on the chamber website. And with that, now we'll close it. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Okay, guys.